Welcome back to Son of Chelsea. Daniel Childs here. Hope you're doing really well on this Thursday. Happy Halloween. I'm not the biggest Halloween guy, I have to say, but it does mean we are a day closer to the festive season firmly beginning. So if you've got any Halloween celebrations, hope they go well. Today we're going to be talking about, I guess, the negativity post Newcastle. I was actually taken aback just looking at some of the reactions online to last night's game. Of course, I didn't expect it to be positive. I wasn't positive for obvious reasons after reacting to the 2-0 defeat to Newcastle. But I guess it's more the anger directed at Maresca, who has gained a lot of praise in recent weeks of accusations that he threw the cup game. We'll get into that, and kind of the second string failing. We've got a piece from Liam Toomey about that. We've also got something that was spoken about pre-game about Chelsea's 5-year plan with Enzo Maresca. We'll get into that. And also Andrey Santos is doing really well on loan at Strasbourg, and I think that's a relevant talking point given Chelsea's midfield, and particularly the B team midfield and how that's going to look moving forward. Please do hit that like button, subscribe if you are listening on the podcast. Thank you for tuning in as well. Please give us a positive rate and review, share with a friend, get more people involved in the community. As I announced in my team selector for the Newcastle game, finally set up a Patreon for Son of Chelsea. I'm putting stuff up there for free at the moment, so you can go and get a taster of the sort of content that's going to be up there. Probably going to be doing a daily or frequent blog in the morning, kind of giving you my thoughts about Chelsea news and football news. I've got a bigger piece about Moises Caicedo dropping soon, and other content that I'm sure we're going to be doing on the Patreon. So if you want to go and support there, financially support the show, would be greatly appreciated. Use my discount code to get yourself one of the retro or modern day metal Chelsea home shirts from Alloy Collectors. Use Son of Chelsea at checkout for 15% off, and do give me your thoughts, interact in the comments, and you know, what do you think about the game last night? Let's start with that. Obviously it was not good, it was drab, and I think it is a fair accusation to level at Maresca that at the very least his team selection was not exactly suitable for the level of opponent that Chelsea faced, and I think that was very clear very early on. And the fact that Chelsea actually could have been 1 or 2-0 down even before Newcastle opened the scoring. One of the things I didn't really touch on as much last night was my frustration, and it's a general football frustration, of the stupid nature of the way teams give away goals by trying to pass out from the back. I'm not opposed to passing out from the back. I'm not opposed to baiting the press, but you kind of need two things with that. You need players capable of doing it, and I think also a chemistry within those players who can execute that vision, and also an opponent understanding the qualities of your opponent. And I just don't think we measured that correctly last night. Liam Toomey focusing on the second string failing, their first real test, and how that will give Maresca food for thought. I mean, basically, effectively talking about what I referred to in the review, and I think many people have, that the B team kind of failed their first real test and stern test. You know, this was not Ghent, this was not Barrow of League 2, this was not even Panathinaikos, this was a Premier League level team. And I think it's a harsh thing to say that Maresca threw a cup tie. We can't prove that, and you know, it sounds dramatic. I think for me it is a bit frustrating that it was in certain positions very much the understudies and very much an experiment. You know, I could have told you before a ball was kicked that Axel Disasi is a liability at right back. You don't really need to know that before a ball was kicked. This wasn't some revelation as the game went on. This wasn't some great tactical tweak from Eddie Howe that exposed Chelsea's weakness. Like, we all knew this. I could have told you this during the summer, that we have doubts about Axel Disasi, that in central midfield, you know, Renato Vega, I like Renato Vega, but, you know, Enzo Fernandez, I think, is that real concern. We'll speak about that with Andrey Santos a little bit, because, you know, there's real concerns now for me with Enzo Fernandez of how he's going to look in Chelsea's midfield. Not playing a natural right winger, yes. It was annoying that Jadon Sancho got ill before the game. I personally thought Sancho and Mudryk would be the two wingers, so maybe that was the original plan, and then Dewsbury Hall gets drafted in late to play in that kind of attacking third, and that doesn't really work out. I still maintain, and you look at the stats, you go back and watch the highlights, Chelsea had opportunities to at least score one goal. So the idea Chelsea created absolutely nothing is, I think, a fallacy. But I think the lack of subs, especially if you're taking Cole Palmer all the way up to Newcastle and you don't play him at all, kind of a little bit baffling. The other baffling thing remains, I think two baffling things, but I think the biggest case I can make is where is Carney Chukwuemeka and why isn't he playing these games? I think it's just, I question the signing of Kiernan Dewsbury Hall. Why is he getting those minutes? Why did we sign him? He's not a relevant or kind of big player for Enzo Maresca. That was the way he was cited when we signed him, that he had a previous connection. He could help instill this style of play. I've credited the fact that Maresca hasn't been dogmatic about a style of play and hasn't used Dewsbury Hall really at all in the Premier League so far. So again, 30 million for me, it kind of feels like a bit of a waste of money, especially when you have Carney there, who I think could have been used a lot better, and I just think is a better player and has better potential. I don't like using the phrase better ceiling because, what's there in front of you should be still relevant. But I even think with what Carney is right now, I think he's a better player than Kiernan Dewsbury, or at least for what this Chelsea team need. I prefer seeing Carney get those minutes. So we're out of it. We may have got Brentford in the quarterfinal. I think that's who Newcastle got, and we move on. I think it's just going to be a bigger conversation of how that B team looks moving forward and whether there are changes, especially as Reece James gets back into fitness. Will Malo Gusto play more of these games, especially at right back with the outcasting of Josh Akpom? I personally don't think it's a good move because you have a natural fullback there you could be giving minutes to, who I think would do a better job than Axel Disasi. Let's move on to this 5-year plan. So this is from Absolute Chelsea, Matt De Bono writing this. It's pre-match press conference, and he was talking about sort of the top four not ever being mentioned when he was being appointed as Chelsea head coach. And these were the quotes he said. He mentioned, "The club never mentioned to me about top four. Since I met the club for the first time, they always mentioned to me that the target, the idea was to build something important for the next 4 or 5 years." Now, I feel like, it's a nice headline, the 5-year plan, and I think it's interesting this week because, of course, we've had Erik ten Hag being sacked. Ruben Amorim, who could have come to Chelsea, is likely now to be Man United new manager or new head coach. And there's been talk about how Enzo Maresca was considered by Man United. And I guess a couple of days ago when Chelsea hadn't have lost the game, that felt better for Chelsea fans. But, I think for Maresca, it's gone better than expected. I've already said that. I'm happy to be proven wrong if Maresca turns out to be a wonderful coach for Chelsea. And I hope if he is here for 5 years, that would be a major success by Chelsea coaching standards. It really would. Now, I think we need to have a bit of a reality check. I just think generally talking as if clubs have 5-year plans, I just think is a bit foolish. It really is, especially in the game we live in, Chelsea's history, not only in the Clearlake or Abramovich era, just our history in general. We do not have coaches in place for that long. That's just history, right? He would be bucking a massive trend, and maybe he will. But we all know if Enzo Maresca goes on a really terrible run and we reach January or February and Chelsea are suddenly mid-table, where Man United have been so far this year, there will be calls for him to be replaced. And given the investment in this squad, given the nature of that head coach sporting director relationship, which places more kind of long-term thinking on the sporting directors than who is in the dugout, we know it's very likely that the head coach would be replaced. That's just the nature of football. Now, I like having a longer term vision, and I think that should go above the head coach of how you're building a squad over a longer period of time. How are you looking at succession plans over certain areas of the pitch? But in terms of thinking 5 years down the line, Maresca needs to win football matches. Chelsea needs to win football matches. Let's think about the next 6 months. And I'm not a fan of thinking like that. It's not something that instinctively I would want in a dream scenario to be thinking of. But there also is a reality that Maresca, like any other coach in his position, needs to prove and needs to earn that trust and faith. I think it's very easy now, because of the success of other long-term coaches at other clubs, to think, well, they got X number of time, so if you just give a manager 5 years, they're obviously going to succeed in the same way. There's some variance within that, but fundamentally, speaking to a Liverpool fan, Paul Machin of Red Men TV, he brought up that, Jurgen Klopp earned the right to get more time by getting Liverpool into finals, by eventually winning trophies, by showing a clear, concrete way of Liverpool progressing from where they were before. That has to be the same standard for Enzo Maresca. It has to be the same standard for every coach. And I think that it is just a bit comical, from a Chelsea point of view, to start talking about 5-year plans only a couple months into the season. It's going well, and I don't think these things actually help Maresca. I think they lead us back into a conversation about Clear Lake and about kind of these lofty ambitions and promises, and then if Chelsea go on a bad run of form, it all creeps up again. So I think 5 years, let's just think about the next 5 months, to be honest, and see where we are at the end of this season, where hopefully Chelsea need Champions League football. That, for me, that is the clear identifying thing of this season. Chelsea need to get back in the Champions League. I think if Chelsea don't get in the Champions League, it's been a failure, because it has to be better for me than last season. I think that's just reasonable. So let me know your opinions on that. Is it unfair? Are you actually thinking it's quite nice to hear that plan and that progress in the next 5 years, or is it a bit of a fallacy? The final thing I wanted to speak about is Andrey Santos. Liam Toomey did a piece breaking down. I definitely suggest link in the description box below to all the pieces I reference on this show. That Andrey Santos has shone really for Strasbourg on loan, and some of the numbers around him this season are massively impressive and revealing about maybe how he's going to progress as a player and a central midfielder, especially goals from central midfield, which has been an issue for Chelsea in recent years. He talks here that Santos scored twice over the weekend, taking his tally for the 24-25 season to 5 goals in 8 league appearances. No other central midfielder in Europe's top 5 leagues has begun the new campaign in such a prolific vein of form, and both of his strikes in the game underline the main ways in which he is thriving in head coach Liam Rosenior's system at Strasbourg. Looking at FB Ref, just for an overview, he's in the 99th percentile of non-penalty goals, non-penalty XG, 92% for non-penalty XG and expected assists, 95% for tackles. So off the ball, and aerials 1-2, it is one of the things that is pointed out by Liam Toomey, that even off the ball, he is an effective player. It's not just that he's attack-minded and then whatever happens behind him, basically, it's a bit of an irrelevance. He is having a balance to his game. I think it's hard to envisage he's going to keep up this scoring record. I mean, if he does, incredible. I'm really happy that Liam Rosenior has got a good job. I think he's a good football mind. I think he's done some decent work in the Championship, and I think for a young group of players, it's good to see that he's working there. And I think for Strasbourg too, that's been a club that has had a lot of disruption and distress, I guess, with fans, a little bit similar to Chelsea for the takeover, and their fans not being happy about that takeover. But I think for Santos, it's really important this works for him this year. Of course, last season was quite disappointing given the hype and stature he was being propped up with, maybe unfairly, and it is one of those things I continually bring up, that with young players, especially moving to a foreign country, it's different from, say, some people talk as if I'm being hypocritical when I talk about and big up Cobham graduates. I think that the difference with them, the fundamental difference is, Cobham grads and players who come through our academy are kind of already in the culture of the club. They play at Stamford Bridge. They play in England. They've either gone on loan to other English clubs. They're kind of used to the culture of the club. That's just natural. And we see, it's similar examples across Europe, right? Where La Masia at Barcelona, you see how quickly those players are integrated and brought up through the system to be comfortable to play at the Camp Nou. Obviously not at the moment, but to play in that stadium, to play for a club of that prestige and the weight of that shirt. I think that's something important. And also I always talk about how young players from our academy are usually very flexible, very versatile, able to play different roles. Now, I think for Santos, it's very important that this season proves a real platform for him to progress and kind of become the first example of the Strasbourg to Chelsea pathway working, because we haven't seen it so far. We've seen it go the other way so far. And even in the case of Petrovic, that's quite staggering to me that he's gone to Strasbourg on loan. For me, he should still be at Chelsea. Another point entirely. The reason I want to speak about Santos and the future of Chelsea's midfield is because I was speaking already about Enzo Fernandez and looking at the B midfield. The A midfield, I'm very excited, very encouraged about. I think Moises Caicedo, who I've written a piece about, please go and check it out. It'll be on my Patreon, is excelling. He's one of Chelsea's best players. The way he's, I think, developed, grown in confidence, grown in influence and stature is brilliant to see. Romeo Lavia, if he can stay fit, I think that is a partnership that I'm really excited about. When you think about the profile of those two players in central midfield, they are technically proficient. I think they're good at receiving the ball under pressure. I think technically they're good enough to create and also being a team that has a lot of the ball, but athletically they are also very dominant. I think they're players that can cover ground quickly, win tackles, be aggressive, a nice balance, and exactly the two things I think you need in the Premier League, especially in central midfield. You need to have that aggression, you need to have that physicality, but of course you also need to have technique to be able to progress the ball, especially the way Maresca wants Chelsea to play. So I think the platform's there. Then I think it becomes a question of how do you supplement those players with others in the squad who, when you do have to make changes, when you do have to rotate, it isn't such a massive downgrade. I think Vega has the potential to become that player. He's still very young and arguably he's not playing in his favoured role. We saw him be massively exposed last night, but to be fair, I think that's as much a blame of Benoit Badiashile playing the ball stupidly when he doesn't need to. But, you know, Vega needs to get better at dealing with those moments a little bit quicker and being alert, because I just don't think he's at the level yet to play in that role, unfortunately. But in the case of Enzo Fernandez and Kenny Dewsbury-Hall, I just think it's such a massive downgrade. I think in terms of when those two are playing in central midfield, the lack of speed, I think the lack of defensive awareness is a real problem. And I think it does create a broader issue, say, with Enzo Fernandez, right, of what he's not supposed to be a B-team player. He's not supposed to be a Dewsbury-Hall. At least with Dewsbury-Hall, you can say, yeah, it cost 30 million. He may not be here that long. Enzo Fernandez was bought for over 100 million. He's supposed to be one of Chelsea's key players. But with Santos, you can see the potential of someone who is maybe fitting that profile a little bit more and actually offering more in attack. And maybe by next season, if he continues on this rich vein of form, makes his way back to Chelsea and maybe becomes more of a first teamer and actually becomes a player in that midfield that's more consistent and more, I guess, versatile, and just a player that fits more seamlessly with the midfield. I say this across the team. It's why, like, Malo Gusto, I think, was a good replacement or backup for Reece James. He isn't Reece James, but we saw as he progressed throughout the year, he added speed, he added dynamism, he added a bit of creativity. You know, you need to find someone of similar profiles, and the Swiss Army knife nature of players that Enzo Maresca wants, I think, is very important. So I think Santos is maybe emerging as that player that means also, I always think this as well, means you don't have to go and spend stupid amounts of money in the transfer window, hopefully. And, you know, maybe Santos as well is looking at it and looking at a Dewsbury-Hall and saying, you know, why couldn't I have remained at Chelsea? But I guess with the thing he has at Strasbourg is regular guaranteed game time, which he wouldn't at Chelsea, to be fair. I mean, he probably could start most of the cup games, could start the Conference League games, and maybe that could be beneficial to him, but it probably is more beneficial to play in a top 5 European league week in, week out, as we're seeing so far this year. So are you excited about Andrey Santos? Do you think he will progress enough to become a first teamer? And kind of your thoughts on that midfield area, which is so key for Enzo Maresca. So that is it for today's Let's Talk Chelsea. Please let me know your thoughts. Support the show on Patreon. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like, subscribe, rate and review the podcast. It really does help us out. Follow me across the socials at SonOfChelsea, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.